The Zephyrian trade station Nexus Prime hummed with the usual cacophony of interstellar commerce. Beings from dozens of worlds moved through the vast corridors, their various appendages clicking, slithering, and shuffling across the polished metal floors. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the breathing requirements of carbon-based, silicon-based, and the occasional methane-breathing trader who visited the neutral zone. Captain Vextera of the Zephyrian Security Force stood in the command center, her four arms crossed in frustration as she watched the latest damage report scroll across her holographic display. The elegant curves of her blue-scaled face were marred by deep worry lines that had appeared over the past 3 weeks. Her species had built this station as a monument to peaceful interstellar trade, but now it was becoming a nightmare. Another storage bay compromised, reported Lieutenant Crix, his insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. The Throxian grain shipment has been completely destroyed. That's the 5th major cargo lost this cycle. Vextera's secondary arms gestured sharply, a sign of extreme agitation among her people. Show me the surveillance footage. The hologram shifted, displaying grainy images of Storage Bay 12. At first, everything seemed normal. Massive containers stacked in neat rows, automated loading systems moving efficiently. Then, the shadows began to move. Small, dark shapes darted between the containers with lightning speed. The image quality made it difficult to discern exact details, but the creatures were clearly small, numerous, and incredibly agile. Enhance Sector 7, Vextera commanded. The image zoomed and sharpened, revealing glimpses of sleek, black bodies roughly the size of a Terran house cat, but with 6 legs and bioluminescent patches along their spines. They moved with purpose, their razor-sharp claws easily tearing through packaging materials to get at the contents within. What made them truly dangerous was their reproduction rate and their apparent intelligence. The Scrix, muttered Chief Science Officer Zelana, her tentacled form undulating with distress. We've identified them as an invasive species from the Outer Rim. Somehow they made it aboard a cargo freighter 3 weeks ago. Vextera turned her attention to the damage assessment. The numbers were staggering. In just 3 weeks, the Scrix had multiplied from what appeared to be a small group to over 2,000 individuals. They had learned the station's layout, could bypass basic security measures, and showed an alarming ability to adapt to new environments. They consumed everything organic, destroyed electronic components to build nests, and their acidic waste was eating through the station's infrastructure. What about the extermination protocols? Vextera asked. Zelana's tentacles drooped. We've tried everything in the database. Chemical agents, sonic disruption, electromagnetic fields, even hired Korthak hunters. The Scrix adapt too quickly. Every method works for a few days, then they develop immunity or resistance. The hunters lasted 2 days before they fled, claiming the creatures were unnatural. The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of the station systems. Several smaller species had already evacuated their businesses. The Throxians were threatening to cancel their trade agreements. Even the notoriously brave Korthak warriors refused to take on an extermination contract. Captain, interrupted Communications Officer Hymnal, we're receiving a priority message from the Galactic Trade Commission. They're threatening to quarantine the entire station if we don't resolve this within the next 7 cycles. Vextera felt her heart skip a beat. Quarantine meant economic death for Nexus Prime. The station's entire purpose was to serve as a neutral meeting ground for dozens of species. Without trade, it would become a worthless hulk of metal floating in space. There has to be something, she said, more to herself than to her crew. In all the galaxy, with all our technology and knowledge, there must be some species that has dealt with this problem before. Actually, Hymnal said hesitantly, there might be. I've been monitoring chatter from the outer sections, and apparently there's a human trader who claims a species has experience with pest control. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only made contact 15 years ago. They were considered primitive by most standards, still relying heavily on chemical propulsion and basic energy weapons. Their technology was centuries behind the most advanced species, and they had a reputation for being somewhat chaotic. A human, Vextera asked skeptically. What could they possibly offer that our best scientists haven't already tried? I don't know, Himmel admitted. But he's in Docking Bay 7 if you want to speak with him. His name is Jake Morrison, and he insists he can solve our problem. Vextera considered her options. The most advanced species in the galaxy had failed. Traditional methods were useless. The station was facing economic ruin and possible evacuation. At this point, she was willing to listen to anyone, even a primitive human. Bring him a conference room 3, she decided. And hymnal? Make sure security is present, but keep them discreet. I don't want to insult him if he actually has a solution. 20 minutes later, Jake Morrison entered the conference room, and Vextera immediately understood why many species found humans unsettling. He stood about average height for his species, with a peculiar bilateral symmetry that seemed so unnatural to beings who had evolved from radial life forms. His skin was a pale pink color, and most disturbing of all, he only had 4 limbs total. What struck Vextera most was his demeanor. While every other species that had attempted to deal with the Scrix had approached the problem with gravity and scientific precision, Jake Morrison looked almost amused. His face wore what her cultural database identified as a smile, and his body language suggested confidence rather than concern. "Captain Vextera," Jake said, extending one of his upper limbs in what she recognized as a human greeting gesture. "I understand you got a pest problem." "Indeed," she replied, gingerly touching his hand with one of her own. "Though I should clarify that this is not a simple matter of pest control. The Scrix are highly intelligent, adaptable creatures that have resisted every conventional method of elimination. They pose a serious threat to the structural integrity of this station." Jake nodded, pulling up a chair that adjusted automatically to accommodate his strained physique. "I've been watching the security feeds you made public. Interesting little critters. They remind me of something we used to have back on Earth." "Earth has creatures similar to the Scrix?" Zelana asked, her tentacles perking up with interest. "Well, not exactly similar," Jake admitted, "but we had our share of pest problems throughout history. Rats, mice, locusts, you name it. Each species thought they were pretty clever too." Vextera leaned forward. "And how did your species deal with these rats and mice?" Jake's smile widened. "We didn't fight them directly. That's where everyone else is going wrong. You're trying to outthink them, out-tech them, overpower them. That works with some pests, but not with the really smart ones." "Then what do you suggest?" Chief Engineer Bronk asked, his rocky features expressing skepticism. "Biological warfare," Jake said simply. The room fell silent. Several species had strict prohibitions against biological weapons, considering them too unpredictable and dangerous for use in civilized space. "I'm not talking about diseases or toxins," Jake clarified quickly, reading the room's reaction. "I'm talking about introducing a natural predator, something that evolved specifically to hunt creatures like your Scrix. The ecological risks would be enormous," Zelana protested. "Introducing a foreign species could disrupt the entire station's biosphere." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. But these particular predators are different. They're not really wild animals anymore. My species domesticated them thousands of years ago. They're completely controllable, highly effective, and they have zero interest in anything except hunting small, fast-moving creatures." "What manner of creature are you describing?" Vextera asked. Jake pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display. The image showed a 4-legged creature roughly the same size as a Scrix, but clearly mammalian. It had triangular ears, forward-facing eyes, and a long tail. Its body was covered in fur, and despite its small size, something about its posture suggested it was a formidable predator. "This is a domestic cat," Jake explained. "Specifically, a breed we call the Maine Coon. They're larger than most cats, incredibly smart, and they have an instinct for hunting that's been refined by millions of years of evolution. On Earth, they're companion animals, but their ancestors were apex predators in their weight class." The alien crew studied the hologram with varying degrees of confusion and concern. "This creature is quite small," Bronk observed. "How could it possibly threaten the Scrix?" Jake's grin became almost predatory. "Size isn't everything in nature, my friend. Cats are ambush predators. They're patient, silent, and absolutely ruthless when they hunt. Plus, they're smart enough to learn and adapt, just like your Scrix, but they've been doing it a lot longer. But surely the Scrix would simply avoid areas where these cats are present," Vextera said. "That's the beauty of it," Jake replied. "Cats don't just hunt for food. They hunt for fun. Earth cats have been known to drive entire species of small animals to local extinction just because they enjoy the chase. And, unlike your technological solutions, the the Scrix can adapt to biological predation. Evolution doesn't work that fast. Zelana's tentacles waved nervously. Even if your creatures could hunt the Scrix effectively, the numbers are wrong. We're dealing with over 2,000 individuals spread throughout the station. How many of these cats would you need? I've got about 30 aboard my ship, Jake said casually. That should be more than enough. 30 creatures to hunt 2,000. Lieutenant Crix's mandibles clicked in disbelief. You're thinking about it wrong, Jake explained patiently. This isn't about overwhelming numbers. One cat can hunt multiple prey items per day, and they don't need to sleep as much as most mammals. Plus, once the Scrix population starts dropping, their reproduction rate will slow down due to stress. It's a cascade effect. Vexterov found herself intrigued despite her reservations. Every other solution had focused on technology or brute force. The idea of using biological instincts against the Scrix was elegant in its own primitive way. Assuming your cats could eliminate the Scrix, she said slowly, what guarantee do we have that they won't become an invasive species themselves? Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, cylindrical device. This is a recall beacon. Cats are naturally curious and food-motivated. When I activate this, it sends out pheromone signals that every cat recognizes as dinner time. They'll come running from anywhere on the station. And you believe this would work? Vextera asked. Captain, Jake said, leaning back in his chair, my species has been dealing with pest problems since before we invented the wheel. We tried everything you've tried, Amor, but sometimes the old ways are the best ways. As if on cue, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Hymnal quickly accessed the communication system, his face growing pale as he listened to the report. Captain, he said urgently, the Scrix have breached the main power coupling in Section 12. Engineering estimates we have less than 6 hours before we lose artificial gravity in that entire section. Vextera looked around the room at her senior staff. They had tried everything else. The station was dying, and with it, the livelihoods of thousands of beings. The human solution sounded insane, but insane was better than certain failure. Mr. Morrison, she said formally, the Zephyrian Security Force would like to hire your services as a pest control specialist. Jake stood up, that strange human smile never leaving his face. Great. I'll need about 2 hours to prep my team and set up the deployment strategy. Oh, and Captain, yes, you might want to warn your crew that cats are, well, they're hunters. Some of the sounds they make when they're working might be disturbing to species that aren't used to predatory behavior. Vextera nodded, though she wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. As Jake left the conference room, she could only hope that humanity's reputation for chaotic solutions would work in their favor this time. Outside the station, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, indifferent to the struggles of the beings within. But aboard Nexus Prime, change was coming. The age-old dance between predator and prey was about to begin again, played out in the corridors of an interstellar trading post with stakes higher than anyone could have imagined. The Scrix had no idea what was coming for them. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime with the confidence of someone who had seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times before. The alien crew members he passed gave him curious looks, their various sensory organs tracking his movement with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Word had already spread throughout the station that the primitive human claimed he could solve their crisis. His destination was Docking Bay 7, where his modified cargo freighter Lucky Strike sat connected to the station's umbilical systems. The ship looked unimpressive by galactic standards, a bulky, utilitarian vessel that relied on fusion drives and magnetic shielding rather than the elegant energy-based propulsion systems favored by more advanced civilizations. What wasn't immediately apparent was the specialized cargo hold that had been custom-built for his unique line of work. As Jake approached his ship, he activated his personal communicator. Arya, prep the cargo bay for deployment. We got a job. The ship's artificial intelligence responded with a distinctly feminine voice that carried just a hint of synthetic amusement. Already monitoring station communications, Jake. Invasive species, high adaptability, resistant to conventional methods. Standard parameters. Not quite standard, Jake replied, entering his ship through the airlock. We're dealing with something called Scrix. They're smart, maybe smarter than anything we've faced before. I'm thinking we go with the A-team for this one. The corridor inside the Lucky Strike was lined with what appeared to be viewing windows, though they were actually one-way barriers that allowed observation of the cargo areas beyond. Soft lighting illuminated comfortable-looking spaces filled with climbing structures, sleeping areas, and various toys. To an alien observer, it might have seemed like a recreational facility. To Jake, it was a carefully designed habitat for Earth's most effective pest control specialists. Arya, bring up the deployment roster. I want Luna, Hercules, Shadow, Whiskers, and Midnight for the initial scout team. They can assess the situation and report back before we commit to full force. Acknowledged. Shall I begin preparation protocols? Do it. Jake made his way to the main cargo bay, where the temperature was maintained at a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius, and the air was enriched with familiar Earth scents. As he entered, dozens of pairs of eyes turned toward him, reflecting the soft lighting like tiny stars. The cats of the Lucky Strike were no ordinary house pets. Luna, a massive silver Maine Coon with heterochromatic eyes, approached first. She weighed nearly 15 kilograms and moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator. Her breeding line had been specifically selected for intelligence, hunting ability, and adaptability to alien environments. Behind her, the other members of the advance team emerged from various resting spots throughout the bay. Hercules was a red tabby whose muscular build made him look more like a small leopard than a domestic cat. Shadow was sleek and black, nearly invisible except for his bright green eyes. Whiskers, despite his playful name, was a battle-scarred orange tom whose left ear bore the marks of countless encounters with various alien pests. Finally, Midnight emerged from the shadows, a long-haired black cat whose ancestors had been specifically bred for stealth operations. "All right, team," Jake said, kneeling down to address his hunters. "We got a new species to deal with. Arya, bring up the Scrix files." Holographic displays around the cargo bay activated, showing the surveillance footage from station. The cats watched intently as the images played, their pupils dilating and tails beginning to twitch with interest. Jake had learned long ago that cats were visual learners when it came to hunting, and showing them their prey beforehand significantly improved success rates. Six-legged, highly mobile, bioluminescent patches for communication, Jake narrated as the footage played. They're about your size, but more numerous. Intelligence level is high, so expect them to try new tactics when they realize they're being hunted. Luna made a soft chirping sound, which Arya's translation system identified as acknowledgement. The other cats began exhibiting classic pre-hunt behavior. Ears forward, pupils dilated, muscles tensing slightly. Environmental factors, Jake continued. Artificial atmosphere, gravity 0.87 Earth normal, temperature varies by section, but averages 20 degrees Celsius. Perfect hunting conditions for you guys. He moved to an equipment locker and began pulling out specialized gear. The harnesses were made from adaptive, smart materials that would adjust to fit each cat perfectly while providing protection without restricting movement. Built into each harness was a miniature camera, vital signs monitor, and communication system that would allow Jake to coordinate the hunt. Arya, what's the station layout looking like? Asterisk Nexus Prime Asterisk is a standard hub and spoke design, the AI replied, projecting a three-dimensional map. Central core with 8 major spokes extending outward. The Scrix infestation is heaviest in the outer sections where cargo is stored, but they've been detected in every major area. Ventilation systems provide access throughout the station. Jake studied the layout, noting the various choke points and potential ambush sites. Ventilation access? Standard atmospheric recycling ducts, approximately 1 meter in diameter. Perfect for feline infiltration. Outstanding. Jake turned back to his team, who were now fully alert and watching him intently. Standard search and destroy protocol, but I want intelligence gathering first. Map their movements, identify their nesting sites, and establish their behavioral patterns before we engage. He began fitting the harnesses onto each cat, a process they tolerated with the patience of professionals who had done this many times before. Luna submitted to the equipment with dignity, while Hercules purred loudly enough that Jake had to check his gear for loose components. Shadows seemed to disappear into the harness, becoming even more difficult to see, while Whiskers and Midnight simply sat still and let Jake work. Communication check. Jake said once all 5 cats were equipped. Luna online. Arya reported as the first cat's systems activated. Hercules online. Shadow online. Whiskers online. Midnight online. Excellent. Now, deployment strategy. Jake activated a holographic interface that allowed him to manipulate the station schematic. We'll start with reconnaissance. Luna and Hercules will take the main cargo areas where the Scrix are most concentrated. Shadow will scout the ventilation systems. Whiskers and Midnight will check the residential areas to make sure we haven't missed any outlying populations. The cats listened attentively, occasionally making soft sounds that Arya translated as questions or confirmations. After 15 minutes of briefing, Jake was satisfied that everyone understood their roles. One more thing, he said seriously. The alien crew is nervous about this operation. Some of them have never seen predatory behavior before. Try to keep the more dramatic aspects of your hunting to a minimum when you're in public areas. Luna made a sound that Arya translated as mild amusement, while Whiskers actually seemed to grin. Jake led his team through the ship's corridors to the airlock that connected to Nexus Prime. As they prepared to enter the station, he activated his communicator to contact Captain Vexthera. Morrison to Station Command. My team is ready for deployment. Acknowledged, Mr. Morrison, came the captain's voice. We've cleared corridors 7 through 12 for your use. Security will maintain a discreet presence, and we've notified all personnel to avoid interfering with your specialists. Copy that. We're going in. The airlock cycled, and Jake stepped onto the station, followed by 5 of Earth's most effective hunters. The change in environment was immediate, different gravity, air composition, and ambient sounds. The cats adapted within seconds, their ears swiveling to track new sounds and their noses working to catalog unfamiliar scents. Almost immediately, Luna froze and made a low chirping sound. Her head turned toward a ventilation grate about 3 meters above the deck. Arya, what's Luna detecting? Pheromone traces consistent with the Scrix profile. Fresh trail, less than 30 minutes old. Jake smiled. His cats have been tracking alien pests for over 5 years now, ever since humanity had begun expanding into space and discovered that every species in the galaxy had their own version of invasive creatures. The cat's natural hunting instincts, refined by millions of years of evolution, proved remarkably effective against alien prey. All right, team, you have your assignments. Stay in communication, avoid unnecessary contact with station personnel, and remember, we're professionals. Luna immediately headed for the nearest maintenance access panel, her claws extending to provide grip on the station's smooth surfaces. Hercules bounded toward the cargo section with enthusiasm that bordered on enthusiasm. Shadow seemed to simply vanish, becoming one with the station's darker corners. Whiskers and Midnight moved with purposeful stealth toward the residential areas. Jake settled in at a monitoring station that Arya had hacked into with embarrassing ease. Multiple screens showed feeds from each cat's harness camera, vital signs, and environmental data. Within minutes, he was receiving intelligence that the station's best scientists had been unable to gather in 3 weeks. Contact, reported Luna's feed. She had found a Scrix nest in a cargo bay, and the camera showed dozens of the creatures moving with coordinated purpose. They were indeed about the size of Earth cats, but their 6-legged gait and bioluminescent communication patterns made them look distinctly alien. Shadow reporting, Arya translated. Extensive tunnel network in ventilation systems. Scrix have modified ducts for improved movement. Estimated population density higher than projected. Hercules had found another concentration in what appeared to be a food storage area. His camera showed Scrix that had grown significantly larger than the baseline, apparently well fed on the station's supplies. Whiskers and Midnight confirmed presence in residential areas. Arya continued. Small populations, possibly scouts or advanced breeding pairs. Jake studied the incoming data with growing understanding. The Scrix weren't just randomly infesting the station. They were establishing a structured colony with specialized populations in different areas. It was exactly the kind of intelligent behavior that had made them so difficult to combat with conventional methods. Analysis complete, he announced into his communicator. Captain Vexthera, I have good news and bad news. Proceed, came the immediate reply. Good news is that my team can definitely handle this. Bad news is that your Scrix population is probably closer to 3,000 individuals, not 2,000. They've established a complex colony structure with specialized castes. There was silence for several seconds. And you believe your cats can still deal with them? Jake watched his monitors as Luna began stalking a group of scriks that had emerged from their nest. Her movements were completely silent, her body language focused and patient. The scriks, despite their intelligence, showed no awareness that they were being hunted. "Captain," Jake said with confidence, "you're about to see why humans became the dominant species on a planet full of predators." On the screen, Luna struck with lightning speed. The scriks had no time to react as 15 kilograms of perfectly evolved predator landed among them. The hunt had begun. The hunt began at 0800 station time, and within the first hour, Jake Morrison knew they were dealing with something unprecedented. His cats had faced dozens of different alien pest species across multiple worlds, but the scriks were proving to be the most formidable opponents they had ever encountered. Luna's initial strike had been textbook perfect: silent approach, explosive attack, swift elimination. But what happened next defied every pattern Jake had observed in his years of pest control. Instead of scattering in panic as most prey species would do, the surviving scriks immediately coordinated a response. Their bioluminescent patches flared in complex patterns, clearly communicating detailed information about the threat. Within minutes, every scrix on the station knew exactly what Luna looked like, how she moved, and what tactics she employed. "Arya," Jake said, studying the feeds from his monitoring station, "are you getting this behavioral data?" "Confirmed. The scriks are exhibiting communication sophistication beyond initial projections. They appear to be sharing detailed sensory information across their entire population." On Hercules' camera feed, Jake watched the Big Red Tom approach what should have been an easy ambush situation. A group of scriks were feeding in a storage container, apparently oblivious to the predator's presence. But as Hercules prepared to strike, the creatures suddenly scattered with perfect timing, as if they had been warned of his approach. "Impossible, Jake Mutilde." There's no way they could have detected him at that distance. The answer came from Shadow's feed. The Black Cat had positioned himself in the ventilation system where he could observe a major scriks gathering point. The creatures weren't just communicating about immediate threats. They were sharing real-time intelligence about every cat on the station. Their bioluminescent patches were functioning as a distributed early warning network. "Jake," Arya's voice carried a note of concern that her programming rarely allowed. "I'm detecting organized retreat patterns. The scriks aren't just avoiding the cats. They're leading them into prepared positions." On screen, Whiskers had followed a group of scriks in what appeared to be a dead-end corridor in the residential section. The Orange Tom was experienced enough to be cautious, but the scriks seemed genuinely trapped. As he moved in for the attack, panels in the ceiling suddenly opened, and dozens of scriks dropped down behind him, cutting off his retreat route. The veteran cat spun around with reflexes honed by years of experience, but found himself facing coordinated opposition rather than prey. The scriks had set a trap. "Emergency extraction," Jake commanded, activating Whiskers' recall beacon. The device sent out a high-frequency signal that would override the cat's hunting instincts and bring him back to the monitoring station immediately. Whiskers bounded out of the corridor with scriks in pursuit, but they broke off their chase as soon as he reached the main thoroughfare where station personnel were present. The creatures were smart enough to avoid exposing themselves to the larger galactic community. "Captain Vextra," Jake called over the communication system, "we need to talk. The situation has changed." 20 minutes later, Jake found himself back in Conference Room 3, this time with a much larger audience. Word of the cat's deployment had spread throughout the station's command structure, and representatives from a dozen different species were present to observe the proceedings. "Explain," Captain Vextra said without preamble. Jake activated his portable holographic display, showing compilation footage from his cat's reconnaissance mission. "The scriks aren't just intelligent. They're operating with a level of coordination that suggests a hive mind or something very close to it. Every individual has access to sensory data from every other individual." The alien representatives leaned forward with interest. This was the kind of discovery that could reshape understanding of xenobiology. "What does this mean for the extermination effort?" asked Chief Science Officer Zelana. "It means we're not dealing with individual pests," Jake explained. "We're essentially fighting a single, distributed organism with thousands of sensory inputs. Every time one of my cats makes contact, the entire population learns from that encounter." Commander Thex of the Korthak military contingent spoke up, his gravelly voice carrying skepticism. "Your creatures failed, then?" "I told you this mission was impossible." Jake's smile was grim, but confident. Not fail, Commander. We just moved to Phase 2. He manipulated the holographic display to show a new set of tactical overlays. The Skrix have made a critical error. In order to coordinate their defense, they've had to centralize their communication network. Arya has been analyzing their bioluminescent patterns, and we've identified 3 primary relay nodes, locations where the communication signals are strongest. And how does this help us? Vextera asked. Because cats are ambush predators, Jake replied. They don't just hunt by chasing prey. They hunt by understanding their prey's behavior and exploiting weaknesses. He switched the display to show station schematics with movement patterns overlaid in different colors. The Skrix think they're safe because they can warn each other about threats. But that warning system requires them to maintain constant contact with their relay nodes. Arya has mapped every communication pathway they're using. Jake's fingers danced over the holographic controls, highlighting specific locations throughout the station. If we can simultaneously eliminate the 3 relay nodes, we'll fragment their network. Instead of fighting one coordinated organism, we'll be dealing with hundreds of small, isolated groups. Your cats can accomplish this simultaneously? Lieutenant Crix asked, his mandibles clicking with interest. Not just my cats, Jake said. All of them. A new display showed the cargo bay of the Lucky Strike, where 25 additional cats were visible in various states of preparation. Each was being fitted with specialized equipment that looked far more sophisticated than the reconnaissance gear the first team had worn. Meet the full strike force, Jake announced. These cats have been specifically bred and trained for coordinated assault operations. They've worked together as a unit for 3 years across 7 different worlds. The alien representatives stared at the display in amazement. The cats moved with obvious purpose and intelligence, some carrying what appeared to be small explosive devices, others equipped with advanced sensor packages. This is unprecedented, whispered Dr. Malix, the station's chief xenobiologist. A pre-spaceflight species coordinating multi-level tactical operations. Jake's expression grew serious. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire evolutionary history. We've learned that the best way to defeat a smart enemy is to be smarter. These cats represent thousands of years of selective breeding, training, and tactical development. But surely the risks, Zelana began, are manageable. Jake cut her off. Every cat is equipped with a recall beacon, vital signs monitoring, and emergency extraction capabilities. If anything goes wrong, we can pull them out instantly. Captain Vextera studied the tactical display for several long moments. The alternative was losing the station entirely, which would affect thousands of beings and billions of credits in trade revenue. What do you need from us? She asked finally. Complete access to the station's internal sensors and environmental controls. Jake replied immediately. I need to be able to track every cat and every Skrix in real time. I also need you to implement a station-wide lockdown during the operation. No civilian movement. All non-essential personnel confined to quarters. How long will this take? Commander Thex asked. Jake checked his chronometer. Prep time, 2 hours. Active operation, approximately 40 minutes. Cleanup and confirmation, another 2 hours. And if it fails? Jake's smile was predatory. Commander, my species didn't become the dominant force on Earth by accepting failure as an option. As the meeting disbanded and the various representatives returned to their posts, Jake made his way back to the Lucky Strike. The full strike force was waiting in the cargo bay, 30 cats in total, representing the finest example of Earth's pest control technology. Luna approached him first, still wearing her reconnaissance harness, but now equipped with additional tactical gear. Her heterochromatic eyes reflected an intelligence that seemed almost unnatural for a domestic animal. Arya, final systems check, Jake commanded. All units green across the board. Tactical network established. Environmental mapping complete. Target identification confirmed. Jake knelt down to address his team. All 30 cats gathered in a semicircle around him. In the soft lighting of the cargo bay, their eyes created a constellation of reflecting light that would have been beautiful if it weren't so predatory. All right, team. This is the big one. We're dealing with a coordinated enemy that knows we're coming. They've had time to prepare, they're smart, and they're not going to give up easily. The cats listened intently, occasionally making soft sounds that Arya translated into the tactical communication network. But Jake continued, they've made one crucial mistake. They think like prey animals, defensive, reactive, focused on survival. You think like predators, patient, coordinated, focused on the hunt. He activated the holographic display, showing the 3 relay nodes highlighted throughout the station. Alpha Team takes Relay 1, Beta Team takes Relay 2, Gamma Team takes Relay 3. Simultaneous strikes at precisely 1400 station time. Once the network is down, free hunt protocol. Eliminate all remaining scriks as efficiently as possible. The cats began exhibiting pre-hunt behavior on a scale Jake had never seen before. 30 individual predators synchronized into a single hunting unit, their movements becoming fluid and purposeful. Remember, Jake said as he made final equipment checks, the galaxy is watching. Show them why Earth cats are the apex predators of pest control. As 1400 station time approached, Jake settled into his expanded monitoring station. Arya had interfaced with every sensor on Nexus Prime, creating a real-time tactical display that showed the position of every cat and every known Scrix concentration. The station had gone into lockdown mode, with all civilian personnel secured in their quarters. Captain Vexthra and her command staff were monitoring from the bridge, while Jake maintained overall tactical control from his position. All teams report ready, Arya announced. Jake took a deep breath, watching as 30 small icons moved into final position throughout the massive station. In a few minutes, the Scrix would discover that intelligence and coordination weren't enough when facing opponents who had been perfecting the art of hunting for millions of years. Execute, he commanded. The hunt for Nexus Prime had truly begun. At exactly 1400 station time, 30 Earth cats struck simultaneously across Nexus Prime, and the Scrix communication network collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Jake watched his tactical display as 3 separate teams hit their targets with military precision. Alpha Team, led by Luna, infiltrated Relay Node 1 through the ventilation system above Cargo Bay 15. The Scrix had established their primary communication hub in a massive storage container filled with Throxian grain, using the organic material to build an elaborate nest structure with bioluminescent panels positioned for optimal signal distribution. Luna's camera feed showed her team, 5 cats including Hercules and 2 others named Ranger and Phantom, moving through the ventilation shaft with absolute silence. The Scrix below were completely unaware, their attention focused on maintaining the complex light patterns that coordinated the entire population's defensive strategy. Contact in 3 and Arya counted down. Alpha Team dropped through ceiling access panels simultaneously, landing among the Scrix relay operators with devastating effect. But what followed wasn't the chaotic slaughter Jake had expected. Instead, his cats displayed tactical sophistication that impressed even him. Luna immediately identified and eliminated the central communication node, a particularly large Scrix whose bioluminescent patches were 3 times brighter than the others. Hercules and Rangers secured the perimeter, preventing any Scrix from escaping to warn other nodes. Phantom and the 5th cat, a sleek gray female named Storm, systematically destroyed the biological relay equipment the Scrix had constructed from station materials. The entire operation took less than 90 seconds. When it was complete, the first relay node was eliminated and its operators neutralized, but more importantly, no information about the attack had been transmitted to the rest of the network. Beta Team's assault on Relay Node 2 was equally effective but completely different in execution. This node was located in the station's residential section, where the Scrix had taken over an abandoned apartment and modified it into a sophisticated command center. The team, led by Shadow and including Whiskers, Midnight, and 2 others, used stealth rather than speed. Jake watched Shadow's feed as the black cat seemed to flow through the darkness like liquid, bypassing Scrix sentries that never detected his presence. The other team members followed his lead, infiltrating the command center from multiple directions simultaneously. When they struck, it was with the coordinated precision of a military special forces unit. Gamma Team faced the most challenging target. Relay Node 3 was positioned in the central core of the station, surrounded by the heaviest concentration of Scrix defenders. The team, led by a massive Maine Coon named Thor, took a completely different approach. Arya, patch me into Gamma Team's audio, Jake requested. The sound that came through his speakers made several alien observers step back in alarm. It started as a low rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once, then built into what could only be described as a coordinated battle cry. 30 cats vocalizing simultaneously in a sound that bypassed rational thought and went directly to the primal fear centers of the brain. The psychological warfare was devastatingly effective. The Scrix defenders, despite their intelligence, were still prey animals at their core. The sound of multiple large predators announcing their presence triggered evolutionary survival responses that overrode their tactical training. As Scrix scattered in panic, Gamma Team struck the relay node with overwhelming force. Unlike the stealth operations at the other nodes, this was a frontal assault that left no doubt about the outcome. All relay nodes neutralized, Arya announced. Scrix communication network is fragmented, detecting widespread disorganization among remaining populations. Jake's tactical display confirmed what he had hoped for. Without their coordination network, the Scrix were reverting to instinctive behavior. Small groups seeking hiding places, individuals fleeing without regard for overall strategy, and, most importantly, no organized resistance to the continuing hunt. All teams, Free Hunt Protocol is now in effect, Jake announced. Pursue and eliminate all remaining Scrix. Remember, these creatures are smart enough to hide, so check every possible location. What followed was perhaps the most impressive display of coordinated predation Jake had ever witnessed. 30 cats spread throughout Nexus Prime, each using their individual skills to maximum advantage while maintaining communication through Arya's network. Luna and her team concentrated on the cargo areas, where their size and strength gave them advantages in the large open spaces. Hercules seemed to take particular pleasure in hunting Scrix that had grown fat on the station's food supplies, stalking them through the storage areas with patient determination. Shadow's team focused on the residential sections, using stealth and agility to flush Scrix out of their hiding places in air ducts behind wall panels and in the spaces between floors. The Black Cat's ability to become nearly invisible made him particularly effective in the complex environment of the living quarters. Thor's team took on the central core areas, where their sheer presence continued to create psychological pressure on any Scrix that attempted to regroup. The sound of large cats moving through the station's main arteries served as a constant reminder that nowhere was safe for the invaders. But it was the individual displays of hunting skill that truly amazed the station's crew. Jake's monitoring equipment captured dozens of remarkable moments. Whiskers cornering a group of Scrix in a maintenance tunnel, then waiting patiently for over an hour until they made a break for what they thought was freedom. His timing was perfect, eliminating 3 of them before they realized their escape route was blocked. A cat named Saber discovering that Scrix could climb walls, then adapting his hunting technique to account for 3-dimensional movement. Within minutes, he was leaping from surface to surface with acrobatic skill that defied the station's artificial gravity. Storm finding a group of juvenile Scrix that had been hidden in an emergency supply cache, then systematically tracking down their parents based on scent trails that were hours old. Perhaps most impressive was a coordinated effort by 5 cats to eliminate a group of Scrix that had barricaded themselves in a computer server room. Instead of forcing entry, the cats simply waited outside every possible exit, while Phantom infiltrated through a ventilation shaft too small for the Scrix to use. When the trapped creatures finally attempted to escape, they found perfectly positioned predators at every exit point. Jake, Arya's voice carried a note of surprise. I'm detecting unusual behavior from some of the cats. Define unusual, Jake replied, watching his feeds carefully. Several individuals are exhibiting play behavior during the hunt. Specifically, they appear to be deliberately extending the chase sequences beyond optimal efficiency parameters. Jake smiled, understanding immediately. They're having fun, Arya. This is what cats do. They don't just hunt for food. They hunt because they enjoy it. It's one of the reasons they're so effective. On his screens, Jake could see what Arya meant. Several cats were clearly toying with their prey, allowing Scrix to think they had escaped before recapturing them. Others were performing elaborate stalking sequences that were far more complex than necessary for a simple kill. Is this detrimental to mission effectiveness? Arya asked. Actually, no, Jake replied. It's psychological warfare. The Scrix are smart enough to recognize when they're being hunted for sport rather than just elimination. It'll make the survivors even more likely to seek hiding places rather than attempt organized resistance. As the hunt continued, reports began coming in from around the station. Captain Vextera contacted Jake every 30 minutes with updates from her security teams, who were monitoring the operation from a safe distance. Morrison, the captain's voice carried amazement. Our sensors are detecting a dramatic reduction in Scrix activity in all monitored areas. How many of your cats have been injured or killed? Jake checked his status boards, where 30 green lights indicated 30 healthy, active hunters. 0 casualties, Captain. My team is operating at full effectiveness. Impossible. Our analysis suggested that any effective predator would suffer significant losses against creatures as intelligent as the Scrix. Captain, Jake replied patiently, intelligence isn't everything in nature. These cats represent millions of years of evolutionary refinement, specifically for hunting small, quick prey. Intelligence just makes the hunt more interesting for them. As if to prove his point, Jake's screens showed midnight discovering a group of Scrix that had constructed a sophisticated trap designed to capture pursuing predators. Instead of falling for it, the black cat studied the mechanism for several minutes, then systematically dismantled it before hunting down its creators. The Scrix are learning, Jake observed to Arya. But my cats are learning faster. By 1600 station time, the nature of the hunt had fundamentally changed. Instead of organized populations of Scrix coordinating defensive strategies, Jake's tactical display showed only scattered individuals and small groups attempting to hide in increasingly desperate locations. Some Scrix had sealed themselves into cargo containers, not realizing that cats could smell them through the walls and would eventually find alternate entry points. Others had fled to areas with extreme environmental conditions, only to discover that Earth cats were far more adaptable than they had anticipated. The most telling sign of the Scrix collapse was when Jake's cats began returning to him voluntarily during the hunt, not because they were tired or injured, but because they had exhausted all the interesting prey in their assigned areas and were looking for new challenges. Luna's requesting permission to assist Gamma Team in the core sections, Arya translated. She indicates that cargo bay areas have been cleared of viable targets. Granted. Same for any other team that completes their sector. As the afternoon wore on, Jake found himself coordinating not just a pest elimination operation, but a complex tactical exercise that was pushing his cats to demonstrate abilities they rarely needed to use. The Scrix, despite their intelligence and initial advantages, were being systematically outmatched by predators who had been perfecting their craft for millions of years. By 1700 station time, the last organized group of Scrix had been eliminated. What remained was cleanup, tracking down the final individuals who had found temporary hiding places throughout the station. Arya, casualty report, Jake requested. Scrix population reduced from estimated 3,000 to approximately 50 individuals scattered throughout the station. 0 casualties. 3 minor injuries, claw damage from contact with station surfaces, already healing normally. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching his cats continue their methodical sweep of the station. The hard part was over. The Scrix network was broken, their numbers decimated, and their ability to coordinate completely destroyed. But as he observed his feeds, Jake noticed something that made him pause. The remaining Scrix weren't just hiding. They were exhibiting behavior he had never seen before in any pest species. They were surrendering. Jake Morrison had never seen anything like it in 15 years of pest control operations across dozens of worlds. On his monitoring screens, the remaining Scrix were exhibiting behavior that challenged every assumption about animal intelligence and survival instincts. In Storage Bay 23, a group of 12 Scrix had emerged from their hiding places and positioned themselves in the center of the open floor, their bioluminescent patches flashing in slow, rhythmic patterns. When Storm approached them, they didn't flee or attempt to hide. Instead, they remained motionless, their light patterns shifting to what Arya's analysis suggested was a form of communication. Arya, are you getting translation data on those light patterns? Jake asked, leaning forward to study the display. Analyzing. The patterns are definitely linguistic in nature, but they're unlike the tactical communications we observed during the initial infestation. The frequency and intensity suggest submission signals. Similar scenes were playing out across the station. Individual Scrix and small groups were emerging from hiding places and exhibiting the same behavior, positioning themselves in open areas and flashing what appeared to be surrender patterns. Jake activated his communicator. Captain Vextera, we have an unprecedented situation developing. I need your xenobiology team to review this data immediately. What kind of situation? The captain's voice carried concern. The remaining Scrix appear to be attempting to surrender. There was a long pause. Surrender? but they're non-sapient pests. Captain, I think we need to reconsider that classification. 20 minutes later, Jake found himself in conference room 3 for the third time, but now the atmosphere was completely different. The crisis was clearly over. His cats had eliminated over 90% of the Scrix population, and the remainder posed no threat to the station. But the implications of what they had discovered were staggering. Dr. Malix, the station's chief xenobiologist, was practically vibrating with excitement as he reviewed the data from Jake's monitoring equipment. The linguistic complexity is extraordinary, he said, his 6 eyes focused on different aspects of the holographic displays simultaneously. These aren't simple creatures following instinct. They demonstrate abstract reasoning, tactical planning, and, most importantly, the concept of surrender. Captain Vextera looked exhausted. Are you telling me that we've been attempting to exterminate a sapient species? Not sapient in the traditional sense, Dr. Malix clarified, but certainly more intelligent than we initially assessed. The surrender behavior suggests they understand concepts of mercy, negotiation, and survival beyond immediate flight responses. Jake studied the ongoing feeds from his cats. His hunters were responding to the Scrix surrender behavior with confusion and restraint. They were clearly capable of eliminating the remaining creatures, but something about the situation was triggering their domestic instincts rather than their predatory ones. Arya, Jake said aloud, analyze cat behavioral patterns in response to Scrix surrender displays. Cats are exhibiting protective behavior typically reserved for kittens or injured companions, the AI reported. Their hunting instincts are being suppressed by recognition patterns that classify the Scrix as non-threatening. My cats won't hunt prey that surrenders, Jake realized. It's hardwired into their psychology from thousands of years of domestication. They're predators, but they're also companions to an intelligent species. Commander Thex spoke up from across the table. This creates a significant problem. If the Scrix are intelligent enough to surrender, they're intelligent enough to resume their destructive behavior once the threat is removed. Actually, Dr. Malix interjected, I believe the situation is more complex than that. The surrender behavior isn't just a survival response. It's a recognition of dominance hierarchy. He manipulated the holographic display to show detailed analysis of the Scrix communication patterns. The creatures aren't just asking for mercy. They're accepting integration into a social structure where the cats, and by extension humans, are the apex species. Jake felt a chill of understanding. They want to join the pack. Precisely. In their original ecosystem, Scrix likely lived in complex social hierarchies with multiple predator-prey relationships. When they encountered a superior species, the survivors would integrate rather than fight to extinction. Captain Vextera looked around the room at the assembled officers and scientists. What are you suggesting? That we keep them as pets? Not pets, Jake said slowly, his mind working through the implications. Partners. He stood up and began pacing as ideas formed. Think about it. The Scrix are incredibly intelligent, highly adaptable, and capable of complex coordination. They've proven they can learn and modify their behavior rapidly. If they're willing to accept humans as the dominant species, they could be invaluable allies. Allies for what? Lieutenant Crix asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. Jake's smile was almost predatory. Every species in the galaxy has pest problems. We've just discovered that Earth cats can not only eliminate invasive species, but they can also domesticate them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's role in galactic pest control could expand from simple elimination to complex ecosystem management. Dr. Malix was the first to speak. The research possibilities alone would be worth billions of credits. A successful symbiosis between 2 species from different worlds would be unprecedented. And if it fails? Commander Thex asked pragmatically. Then, my cats finish the job, Jake replied simply. But I don't think it will fail. Earth cats have been forming relationships with other species for thousands of years. If the Scrix are genuinely willing to accept integration, the cats will probably welcome them. Captain Vextera made a decision. Dr. Malix, I want a full biological and psychological analysis of the surrendering Scrix. Commander Thex, prepare contingency plans for immediate elimination if the integration fails. Mr. Morrison. Yes, Captain. I want you to test this theory. Can your cats actually form a working relationship with former prey? Jake was already activating his communicator. Arya, patch me into Luna's feed. I want to run an experiment. On the main screen, Luna's camera showed her facing a group of 5 scriks in Storage Bay 15. The creatures were exhibiting the submission posture, their bioluminescent patterns flashing slowly. Luna sat about 3 meters away, watching them with the focused attention cats typically reserved for interesting but non-threatening situations. Luna, Jake said, knowing the cat could hear him through her communication system, approached the scriks. Non aggressive posture. The massive Maine Coon stood and walked slowly toward the group of creatures. As she approached, the scriks maintained their submission display, but began making soft chirping sounds that Arya identified as non-threatening vocalizations. When Luna was within a meter of the group, something remarkable happened. The largest scriks slowly approached her, moving with obvious caution, but without fear. Luna remained motionless as the creature approached her front paws and began what could only be described as a greeting behavior, touching her paw with its own appendages while maintaining soft vocalizations. Incredible, Dr. Malix whispered. They're actually communicating. The interaction continued for several minutes, with other scriks gradually joining the greeting behavior. Luna remained calm throughout, occasionally making soft sounds of her own that seemed to reassure the creatures. Arya, analyze the interaction patterns, Jake commanded. Both species are exhibiting behaviors consistent with pack integration, the AI reported. The scriks are demonstrating submission while testing for acceptance. Luna is providing reassurance while maintaining dominance position. Jake felt a sense of pride mixed with amazement. His cats were improvising diplomatic solutions to problems that had stymied the galaxy's greatest minds. Captain, he said, I recommend we proceed with integration testing. Keep the cats on station for another week to establish stable relationships with the surviving scriks. If successful, we've solved your pest problem permanently while gaining valuable research subjects. And if they revert to destructive behavior, Jake's expression became serious. Then we learn why the integration failed and improve the process for next time. But, Captain, these scriks have seen what my cats can do. They know that cooperation means survival and resistance means extinction. That's a powerful motivator for behavioral modification. Over the following days, Jake watched his cats work with the scriks to establish what could only be described as a multi-species colony. The surviving creatures proved remarkably adaptable, learning to follow new behavioral patterns that eliminated their destructive tendencies while maintaining their natural abilities. The scriks began using their intelligence and agility to assist with station maintenance, accessing areas that were difficult for larger species while following strict protocols that prevented damage to critical systems. They formed working relationships with individual cats, with each feline essentially adopting a small group of scriks as subordinate pack members. Most remarkably, the scriks began modifying their reproduction rate to maintain sustainable population levels. Without the pressure of competing for resources, they naturally limited their breeding to replacement numbers. Dr. Malix was fascinated by the development. The scriks are essentially becoming a domesticated species in real time, he explained to Jake. Their intelligence is allowing them to consciously modify instinctive behaviors to fit into the new social structure. And the cats are teaching them, Jake added, watching Storm demonstrate hunting techniques to a group of young scriks who followed her through the ventilation systems without causing any damage. They're not just accepting them as pack members, they're actively training them. By the end of the week, Nexus Prime had transformed from a station under siege to a unique research facility where 2 alien species were successfully cohabitating under human supervision. The Galactic Trade Commission sent observers to study the phenomenon, and several universities requested permission to establish research programs. The surviving scriks numbered 47 individuals who had fully integrated into the station's ecosystem under feline supervision. They maintained their intelligence and natural abilities while channeling them into constructive rather than destructive activities. Captain Vexteros stood with Jake in the observation deck overlooking Storage Bay 15, where Luna was teaching a group of scriks how to identify different types of cargo containers. The scene was surreal, a massive Earth cat calmly instructing alien creatures who had once been considered an existential threat to the station. Mr. Morrison, the captain said, I believe your species has given us something more valuable than simple pest control. What's that, Captain? A model for interspecies cooperation that doesn't require centuries of diplomatic negotiation. Your cats have accomplished in 1 week what most civilizations take decades to achieve. Jake smiled, watching Luna's patient instruction of her alien students. Captain, You haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you see what these scriks can learn to do when they're properly motivated. As if on cue, one of the scriks successfully identified a damaged container that station sensors had missed, pointing out the problem to Luna with obvious pride. The cat acknowledged the discovery with a soft purr that seemed to delight the entire group. The pest problem was solved, but Jake suspected that humanity's real contribution to galactic civilization was just beginning. Earth cats had not only eliminated an invasive species, they had transformed potential enemies into valuable allies. In the depths of space, aboard a modest cargo freighter, 30 cats had demonstrated that sometimes the most sophisticated problems required the simplest solutions. Millions of years of evolution, refined by thousands of years of human partnership, had proven once again that there was no substitute for the patient wisdom of natural selection. The scriks had learned to fear cats, then to respect them, and, finally, to follow them. It was a lesson that would reshape how the galaxy approached the ancient problem of invasive species. And, in Conference Room 3, Jake Morrison was already planning his next contract, knowing that word of his success would spread throughout civilized space. The universe was full of pest problems waiting to be solved, and Earth cats were ready to teach every species the same lesson the scriks had learned. Sometimes the best solution isn't to fight nature, it's to join it.